and I have just been drinking in, ever since I arrived, the work of Michael Abrams, our guest artist, over across the street in our special exhibition, Lineages, Artists Are Never Alone, which I invite you to visit after the talk tonight. Very pleased to welcome Michael, who grew up in Rensselaer, do I have that right, County, in a home perched above the majestic greenery of the Hudson Valley. And those views became deeply ingrained in his subconscious and in his imagery, and I know that he will share that with us tonight. He's an artist and painter of nature who's exhibited around the United States and abroad, and he's lived and worked in Manhattan for 30 plus years and now enjoys a life here in southern Vermont. Michael's joined by Sarah Freeman, the Director of Exhibitions at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. Sarah joined BMAC in 2015 as Exhibitions Manager and was appointed Director of Exhibitions in 2021. And prior to BMAC, Sarah held positions at Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian Design Museum in New York, Dulwich Picture Gallery in London, and the Lighthouse Center for Architecture Design in the city in Glasgow, Scotland. I want to give a big thanks to GNAT-TV for recording this evening, and I'm deeply grateful to Green Mountain Academy of Lifelong Learning for partnering to present this program. GMALL will be back with us this Saturday, February 8th, next Saturday, February 8th, to share National Theatre Live, the best of British theatre broadcasts in cinemas around the world, featuring the one-woman play Prima Facie, starring Tony Award-winning actress Jodie Comer. That's from 2 to 4 p.m. on the 8th in our Kell Pavilion across the way. And finally, I hope you'll save the date of Friday evening, February 21st, to join us here at SVAC for our members' preview of the special exhibitions going up next, our spring solo shows. And we'll pay one last look to Lineages that evening as well before the exhibition comes down. So with that, I welcome Michael and Sarah for tonight's talk, The Sublime in Art and Nature.
Great. Thank you, Amelia. And I'm very glad you all could come and on a Thursday evening and join us tonight. I'm very happy Sarah can do this with me because we've done some things together, and I'm glad I can rope her into something else. So we're going to start with about a 10 or 12 minute slideshow. And this will give you a little background into our theme and help tell the story of my work and the sublime in nature and art. So there's a little art history lesson in here as well. I'm not sure if any of you have taken art history classes, but it's going to feel like that a little bit. So please don't fall asleep. So this is some of my work in the Lineages exhibition in the next building. And so the sublime in art and nature. Whether you watch a movie, look at a piece of art, listen to music, or you are aware of your emotional reactions. You're pleased, made to laugh, or you're terrified. And we see a lot of things every day that astonishes us, especially on our phones. In the news, and we think that is kind of like a wow experience. But with the sublime experience, we're looking for a transcendent moment that holds our interest and supplants all other thoughts. So this evening we're going to focus on the historical context of this emotional reaction by looking at the Romantic era concept of the sublime in art, specifically the depiction of nature in painting and how it has influenced my work. So the Romantic period basically was through the 1700s to the mid-1800s. And for me, in America, I think it lasted a little longer with the Hudson River School painters. This concept championed a new understanding of the bond between nature and the inner self. A little background. Edmund Burke wrote of the concept of the sublime in 1757 in his work Philosophical Inquiries. Burke saw nature as the most sublime object capable of generating the strongest sensations in its beholders. It can evoke feelings not only of beauty and awe, but trepidation and fear, fear being the strongest emotion. It was an animating force in painting and other art forms of the Romantic era. So, Sarah Freeman and I had the pleasure of working together, co-curating an exhibition called In Nature's Grasp at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center about a year and a half ago. And that exhibit also centered on this romantic era concept of the sublime in nature. That featured 11 artists, and for me it was quite a feat, but it was basically her job. So I feel I brought the more traditional artists to the mix, and Sarah brought the unexpected, or what I like to think of as the abstract sublime. It was paintings, drawings, sculpture full of texture and color that evoked the natural elements, which is something we were going for with this. For me, Sarah and my project grew out of how I have seen my work in the past. In particular, an installation I did at the Brattleboro Museum in 2020 called Arcadia Rediscovered. And that show also centered on this theme. So this and the next few images are of that installation. It was in a small gallery with high ceilings, the walls were dark, the paintings were illuminated, and there was a sound element as well with nature and birdsong. And you had helped me with that, which was really added a lot to the exhibition. This immersive experience was an attempt to trigger emotions and memories in the viewer. And here's some text that accompanied this installation. A fleeting glance at a formative moment and personal observation is what is being offered to the viewer. Visual details and aspects of nature are developed into a broader visual experience. This work summons distant scenes, the diffused, unanswered shapes of trees and landscapes, those glints of light reflecting off some distant water, all suggesting a selection of familiar fragments of the natural world and a shared sense of nostalgia for what we have known and believed to be permanent. So my work in landscapes basically are influenced by the nature around me, art history and contemporary art, and many contemporary artists as well. I like to think that I'm bridging the romanticism of the 19th century with the minimalism of contemporary art. In the process, the works are made by layering oil glazes from semi-transparent to opaque, and this creates a kind of atmospheric and luminous quality in the work. So my paintings are not real, documentations of places. I don't think of it in that way. They're conglomerates of memory and photographs, and whenever we're driving around, especially in this Vermont area, I try to take pictures of trees, skies, all the weather, the abundant weather here, and use them as background notes for the paintings. So this is another kind of fantastic. It's rain far away. You always, Vermont is like all these little valleys have these incredible microclimates, and especially where the West River Valley that I live in. I mean, everywhere I travel, I see my work. I see potential of a painting or something, and whether you're traveling up Route 100, which is notorious for beauty, and then or east to west on Route 30. There's always these clouds that hug the small mountains and hillsides, and occasionally you'll enter a valley and there'll be some cloud just suspended in the center of the valley as if it's supernatural. And I just love that about the weather here. So I moved to Vermont in 2008, and this move here has really had a complete and profound effect on my work. And also, it informs my place in nature, which has changed so much, being a Manhattanite for so long. That's our little town of Jamaica, and there's some little roof peaks back there that, under the arrow, that is my studio and home. So we see the seasons change here. No one season is the same from year to year. Watching the animals survive, the trees and plants change. You get a real sense of the cycle of life. And living here has just really changed my perspective on what happens in nature, the mechanisms of nature. This is a little backyard shot. So now for a little art history. Landscape painting of the Romantic era depicted the immensity of nature, its grandeur and power. Think William Turner. This is Turner's Lake of Lucerne from Brunnen, 1842. And it's completely full of light. This is another Turner. This is Hannibal and his army crossing the Alps from 1812. Here we have a foreboding and dramatic sky, and a lot of drama happening on the ground as well. So this era not only brought us Turner, but Byron, Keats, the haunting paintings of Caspar David Friedrich. This is The Abbey in the Oakwood, 1810, by Friedrich. His symbolic and anti-classical work conveys a subjective and emotional response to the natural world. This era also planted the seeds for the Hudson River School of painting here in America, with monumental depictions of nature by Albert Bierstadt, Thomas Cole, Frederick Church, Martin Johnson Heade, and others. These painters reveled in the untamed nature of the New World. This is Frederick Church's Vale of St. Thomas, Jamaica, 1865. It has a real sense of the exotic, sense of the kind of palm tree and it's the weather. There's like 2 or 3 kinds of weather happening in it. So it's quite stunning in its depiction of sort of a dramatic nature. They also incorporated a sense of theater through scale, subject matter, and the style of framing and presentation of the period. This is Albert Bierstadt's The Domes of Yosemite in 1867. So paintings like these brought the wonder and awe of an untamed nature to a new American middle class and helped shape the visual identity of the American West. And this one's kind of fun. This is a very real, surreal Thomas Cole painting called The Voyage of Life, Youth, 1842. It's a series of paintings that depicts the cycle of life through a dramatic symbolism. It's a visual sermon of 4 works: youth, manhood, old age, and childhood. And this is one of my favorite painters, and this is Martin Johnson Heade, Sunset Over the Marsh, 1876. Heade worked a lot and painted in New Jersey, in the marshes of New Jersey. So there's a lot of paintings like this in his portfolio. And he also is known, he's done several paintings with these kind of hay piles that are kind of these odd little shapes. And this I love because there's a light from within, and he's one of the Hudson River School painters that really made illuminated works. And this grand thing is Frederick Church's Heart of the Andes. It has a real sense about it of a real presence, as it is a piece of furniture as well. It is quite stunning. It's at the Metropolitan Museum. This painting brought a sense of grandeur and spectacle to the public with this very large and detailed painting, which was viewed by thousands each month in New York and London in 1859. So these Hudson River School artists made these works through the lens of manifest destiny. These paintings can be seen as historical documents, but we appreciate them in a different way than our 19th century counterparts. At the same time, this wilderness was treated with almost a spiritual reverence, especially by Cole. It was deemed for man's use. So now I'd like to change gears and move on to some contemporary influences of my work. This is going to be another favorite of mine. This is Milton Avery. This is called Vermont Landscape. And Avery spent his summers through the late 30s and 40s in and around the Jamaica, Vermont area painting and sketching. And with this work, you can see how the space is flattening. And here's another Avery, Vermont Spring, 1945. This is a recognizable hillside in the Jamaica State Park. This rocky outcropping is above what's called a salmon hole, which is a popular swimming spot. And in this work, Avery reduces nature to line and color. And we have a hint of the abstract sublime with artists like Clifford Still and Mark Rothko. This is Rothko's Blue, Green, Brown, 1952. This influence can be seen in some of my works where the space is flattened and there's a singular tone, like this painting's Stratton Hue, 60 by 60. And this very minimal painting called Scattered Yellow, 68 by 72. And this more recent painting called The World as Will, 53 by 72. So this journey in my life's work and influences brings us back here to lineages. This is Elusive Archetype from the Lineages installation. And lastly, some fireflies. This is also in the Lineages.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you. So, yeah, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Some of them Michael got ahead of time, but I've been writing some of them just now, so we'll do a little mix. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Michael, it's very notable, I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because I know that we've talked a lot about the sublime in landscapes in particular before. So I feel like I can anticipate your answers to some of these questions. But in so many of the works that you selected by other artists, I'm struck by how much depends or how important the viewer's physical reaction is to the work that they're seeing and how that response really kind of triggers the emotion. And I wonder how you consider that or how you're thinking about that physical reaction when you're making your paintings.
Yes, I do. I think about well, first color, and as I've made paintings from doing in the 90s, they were much more involved. They had much more depth. They had more trees and leaves and things and clouds, and now the paintings are somewhat flattened, and I'm relying on color for an emotional response. Not just the subject matter, but I'm also relying on your emotions that deal with memory and what you've seen in your life, not only the art you've seen, but where you've gone, where you have experienced nature. And I'm not trying to get you to see the same thing. I'm trying to build a bridge between the paintings and your experience looking at it. And what a lot of the painters in history have done is that very thing, and they use a lot of devices to do it. And at the time, photography was budding. That painting by Cole, and they just had this sense of realism to them, and those painters wanted you to go, wow, this is amazing. And they really thought of nature as sort of man's cathedral, but they were looking at it from a very spiritual and religious aspect. But they were also looking at it as, this is my land, and I'm presenting it to you. We all are people, humans here. We were given this, and we can do whatever we want to it. And we feel differently. Some of us feel differently about that now, and we think that it is something to be preserved. The monumental scale of some of the work. There was a lot of small, precious paintings done at this era, but the monumental scale also is a key factor, how it was presented. The architecture of the time, the gold frames, it was all a show, and they relied on a sense of theater. This sense of theater that we think it might be a little tacky now for us, you know, it's like we don't really do that now. But they relied on it to try to bring this show to the public. And Frederick Church's painting, you know, he was very successful. That I think that painting sold for like $10,000 at the time, which is millions now.
Wow.
And it traveled to London, and the buyer, oddly enough, the buyer couldn't have the painting till it was done touring. And these large paintings traveled around, and other people were allowed to make prints and etchings of them to make money. And so you would buy an etching of that thing at the time. And, this was in New York and London. So there was a new part of America that wanted this America, a piece of America, the new America that had this sense of reverence, and everyone was in awe of. I think, you know, we miss that now. You know, we don't feel the same way about it now, but we're more ecologically minded about it, which is good, because they just cut all the trees down. You know, they needed fuel and all sorts of things, and a lot of hemlocks in New York State were cut down for tannery. They just stripped the bark off for the tanneries and destroy things and not do anything very selectively.
So do you feel ever like drawn to have fidelity to nature, like representational fidelity to nature? Does that like tempt you ever?
Yes, but no.
Okay.
I think a lot of artists who work with nature, like myself, we use a filter, and this filter is our style, our way of developing the object. It is the process of it that creates a filter. It is something you notice that creates a difference from reality to what you're seeing. And I think that helps convey this message. And also it helps with the concept of the sublime moment, because the sublime moment is an unreal moment, and that's what you're going for. You wanna sweep people off their feet. Not that you can, but you can try. And I think that's an important aspect of all the work you see in so many places. Is we're not just documenting nature, but there's a barrier, and your brain, it makes your brain fill in a lot of aspects of it, and complete the sentences of the painting, and that's triggering a lot of things, and that involvement removes you from your current presence, and I think that's the thing about artwork that's why we all love it so much, is because it does this thing.
I feel like I'm asking you a lot about work that maybe you wish you could make, or you wish you were making, but I want to talk about the work that you're actually making as well.
Yes.
And you showed some paintings by Milton Avery and
Yes.
Roscoe, and I think I'm just really curious about how you borrow or steal or kind of take inspiration, a nice euphemistic way of saying steal, from artists whose work is so different from your own, and
Yes.
what you look for and what you value in that.
So I was an art history major, and I still love history. And so I spent a good deal of the early part of my life just kind of thinking about other artists, especially when in painting class, just like, oh, this month I'm making, this. Oh, it looks like that, we just saw these slides in art history class. I'm making this now, So you go through these phases, especially me, who, I've always been an appropriator, especially in my early years in the East Village when I made all these really crazy sort of allegorical themed paintings that were appropriations from art history. And that calmed down and became paintings. It did. It took 2.5 decades to calm down. And I think about I think about other artists a lot. What did Milton Avery not need to do to get his point across? He found out what he didn't need to do. And so you go through life editing, and you take out the things you don't need to do anymore. And so now, right now I'm at this spot where, this painting, it has all, you don't see much in it, but you get a feeling, sort of, and it's, it's sort of, it does something,
Yeah. And so going back to the more surreal aspect of the sublime that we've experienced, and in the exhibit that we put together, we had a couple of artists. Lily Prince was one, Marcy Hermansader, who were taking a more surreal approach and kind of being influenced by people like Charles Birchfield, who, though he was not part of the Romantic movement, he was working into the 20th century, but I still feel like the way that he was painting, trying to really make visible the energetic power of nature. And I wonder, again, if that's something that you kind of see as being an aspect of your work, any sort of surreal landscapes or interior landscapes, what have you?
Yes. In the end, you're making art for yourself, and you're trying to please something, that's about you. And the idea of not having it be slightly surreal, that would bore me, and it bores a lot of artists, It's like you want to you want to enliven the work with your spirit, It's like there's some kind of you're just giving this thing your energy, It's like you're spending time with it, and it's like, for me, there's a lot of layers of glazes, and there's a long process, so you end up kind of having a relationship with this thing you're making, and there's a lot of that in there. I'm not sure they're overtly surreal, but some people have said they seem surreal to them because they are slightly unreal or vague. There's a vagueness to them that kind of is part of that barrier or that filter that I think helps the work in a way, because if I painted in a lot of trees and things, you would go, oh, that's a nice painting with trees. But if you don't do that, then you leave it open. You leave a lot of aspects open.
So you were saying that earlier in previous work you were adding a lot more detail.
Yes.
And
yes.
how did you stop? How did you edit that? What kind of made you realize that you wanted to?
It
change?
goes back and forth. Like there's some paintings I've done recently that are as vague as this, and then there's some paintings that have more distinct trees, and part of that is about the story of each individual image, and I mean, for me they're like short stories. I'm giving you this thing, and you read it, you read into it what you want, and but nature is vague also. The way we look at nature, when we drive around, we don't, you can spend hours looking at a bunch of ants on the ground and moving leaves and stuff, and that's so detailed. But really how we experience nature is in the whole. We see a vast area of it, and we get it all at once. And by evolution or whatever, we accept that we don't see every detail, and we're pleased with it. We're fine. Seeing every detail probably would make us all crazier.
Yeah. So you just mentioned a little bit about your process.
Yes.
And so much of your work, just the way that it's made even, has to do with time and the passage of time. It takes so much time for you to make a painting. And I also think that there's a certain there's a kind of influence of the idea of time in the feelings that the paintings evoke. There's some sort of air of nostalgia to some of them.
Yes.
Memory is definitely part of them. And we were just talking before about the way we live now is so different.
Yes,
Everything
yeah.
is so fast. Everything is very immediate. We have computers in our hands.
Yes.
And I wonder how, I mean, is working the way that you work maybe a little bit of an intentional slowing down?
I think I'm going against what most of the art world likes now. Most of the international art world likes now, and that is a more quick read with work, and that that goes with the territory of having things change. And in the 80s and 90s, no one wanted to look at a landscape in Manhattan, in any of the galleries. You couldn't get a landscape shown, except for perhaps a handful of people, like Stephen Hannock perhaps, or some others. And then that changed. Everyone went, oh, figurative work, wow. And then abstract work, yes, but sort of this new image painting of the mid to late 80s, and then you had sort of a real expansion of the art world in the 2000s, and then you had also a parallel expansion with the kinds of work that was made, where everyone made everything, and you could see everything. The Whitney Biennials began to be, instead of being kind of a linear thing, they were multifaceted visual experiences, and I think it was probably more fun for curators, because there was just more variety. Galleries started showing a lot more works, and a gallery started showing within the galleries a variety of artists in their stable. So they'd have 25 artists that'd all be very different, instead of having a lot of similar look or similar theme. And that has changed so much. But still, I'm making work that takes time to absorb, and a lot of people still make work that takes time to absorb. It's about mood and emotion, and that's not a quick read. So I'm going against what's happening now, and that's often, a little frustrating, because people want something, a splash of color, and my work has always been also a bit anti-conceptual, and not because I'm mad at that, but I think it just has gone this way, and I've had no control over the way it's gone, and you're helpless. You're sort of in a tide with your work, and it takes you somewhere. But that's really the great thing about it, is you don't know what you're going to do next year, and I find that's all okay, because you find your niche as an artist, and you find people that think you're, can relate and think this is okay.
So if we're thinking about the sublime tripod, or triumvirate of beauty, awe, and terror, from my point of view, your work really lies pretty firmly in the beauty.
Yes.
I'm not going to call it a spectrum, because I was talking about it that way before, but I think, no, it's really important that all of those things are coexisting all at once and not necessarily oppositional. But I wonder if you ever feel compelled or drawn to, I mean, this is a dark painting.
Yes, this is probably the scariest thing about it. And it's not that scary, it's just like, oh, it's a rainy day, the clouds are dark.
But do you ever think about the kind of the darker side?
I do. I think, to me, I'm still in the I'm in love with nature phase in my life. I'm in love with my backyard. I'm in love with the fog, and all of that. And I don't know when I'll grow out of it. And at some point I probably will, because I look at more things that do scare you, and art that does really like push more buttons. And I think, ooh, I want to do that. It's like, so yes, I think in the future, yes, that could be kind of interesting. So I'm still on the same. I think I'm still on the same page. So
that's interesting that you said you're talking about like the love kind of aspect of this, because I think I'm curious. Now it seems that it's really challenging to look at contemporary landscapes and not think about climate change and not think about how things have changed, how things will change, what might happen. And I was reading something once where a climate activist was talking about having to fall in love with something in order to feel the urge to protect it. And so I wonder if, as somebody who is really, falling and continually falling in love with nature, if you feel like part of your role as an artist who is not documenting nature, but who's really very kind of connected to it, if you feel like part of your role in the future is to help people find that connection, that like heart connection with nature.
I think I feel I do that now, and especially with the Arcadia Rediscovered exhibit, I really wanted people to go get stuck in this room and listen to this sound and look at these lumps that look like nature, and that's what I wanted, and that worked in a limited way, but that really thrilled me. That was the most thrilling exhibit or installation kind of thing I've ever done. For that reason, it's because people did say, oh, this really calms me down. It's like, yes, well, that's nature. That's what that does. When I lived in New York, I grew up in a sort of dying dairy farmland in Rensselaer County, and it was and I could see the Catskills from my bedroom window, and I watched a lot of sunsets. But when you're 13, you don't care, and it's like, but you take that with you. You take all that stuff with you, and enjoying nature was, while I lived in New York, you don't see a lot of nature. You see slices of sky basically, and you can go to the park, or you go upstate to a little state park for a while or a day, and that's all you get, when you're young and living in a city. And I appreciated nature like most people, where you go hiking in it, you go swimming or something, you go to a lake, and that's it. Nature serves a purpose for you, and that's might be it. And then you go and you go out to dinner, and then I think that changed for me. I never thought I would move to Vermont in a million years, and I just went, oh well, this is happening, and then you're here, and you're oh, this is really different. There's very few people, and there's where I live, there's not a lot of houses around. There's we have this wonderful streams in the back of our house, there's these brooks, and we have these fields, and it's completely different. And I think it took me a long time to acclimate myself to this new world. It wasn't such a hard segue, because growing up in upstate New York, there's similar aspects to that. But living in the city for so long and then coming here was sort of a challenge mentally. But after a while, I started really noticing the weather and the color and the topography and all the details of nature here that you don't see, and you see it every day, so you get absorbed in it. And you take it for granted a little bit, but then it works its way into your subconscious. And then my work began to feel more like the weather here. my work in painting in New York, my work was well, that yellow painting, this painting is a New York painting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's different, and so that ends up, making me think my work has changed a lot in a way. It sort of went, from earlier, more realistic work to very minimal color field paintings, and then I started putting nature back into it. But I put nature back into it because it was real for me. It wasn't just an affectation, and I wasn't just trying to make a pretty painting. This excitement about nature was real, and it conveyed itself into my paintings. I didn't have to try, and so that I wanted to, that's my bridge or message to the viewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that sometimes your paintings include references to human existence.
Yes.
But they're very subtle, and it sometimes feels, I wonder if you ever have to hold yourself back from going
sometimes
further.
when I start a painting and it's like, oh, this is way too many farm fields. This is like, it looks, like a lot of farm fields. It looks like, the wind outside the window. It's like, oh, tree line, little areas around it. And that's easy to do because you see it so much. And a lot of that is removed out. And then some things are left. I like the idea of the hand of man in artwork. I think that's really brilliant. And the romantic painters, the later romantic painters, removed the hand of man, and they knew they were doing it purposefully. Thomas Cole grew up in England during their Industrial Revolution, and he moved here, having seen what happened in England. He thought differently, and he was very concerned about nature being exploited. But that was the deal, that was everyone's deal. Nature got exploited. But Frederick Church also left out a lot of things when he painted paintings of areas. He left it out. He left out mills. He left out railroad tracks. All sorts of things. They left it all out. And there was, I think, I remember seeing a church painting of tree stumps and things, but I could never find it again. But that's stuck in my mind, and they weren't overtly ecologically minded. They were telling the story about nature, so it was a little different.
One of the things that I always enjoy, if you ever get a chance to look at an artist's phone, look at all the pictures that they take, because it's really incredible.
Yeah.
They're not always good pictures.
No.
In fact, they're usually really bad pictures, but they're very specific, and it's, you're taking pictures from a moving car, or like when you're jumping, out. I remember you, when we were working on your show at BMAC, the Arcadia Rediscovered, you were taking a lot of pictures of the meadows on the way into town. And I wonder, I'm just really curious about how that process works for you, what you're seeing, what's catching your attention and kind of making you pause, and then how those things get translated into your paintings.
I'm really thrilled when I come across something, driving around, that looks unreal in the sky, and this always happens. Like, wow, those clouds. I mean, you can't, if you painted that realistically, no one would believe you. Sort of, and I think that's things about nature that look surreal. The strongest aspect that draws me to those bits and pieces of nature is light, and that what light blobs or light shapes, or what the light does, the color of the light, how the land is lit, how the light reveals everything. Without it, it's black. So the light is telling the story of nature for you, and how we see it, however our brain is absorbing all of this stuff and putting it together. And we're seeing these images in our brain. Our brain is also telling us a story as it's processing information. Mm-hmm. So there's another layer there. And so you end up being excited about something. You see the meadows, it's really neat. It's like this swampy thing, and it's got these trees with these vines draped all over the place, and it's really cool. And then it changes all the time, which is a really kind of neat thing. And that you take a picture of it 1 week, and then 3 weeks later you take another picture of it, it's all different. Mm-hmm. And those moments are interesting to me. And then there's this library I have of just the way a tree will stick out of something, and just this shape, or how a grouping of trees kind of converse together in a grouping. That is interesting. And it's not about documenting those specific trees. It's about the idea of it, or the feel of the relationships between shapes. Shapes move, they're directional, so you end up relaying that information into your work.
Hmm. So are there particular experiences, whether they're art experiences or, experiences in nature, that you seek out to kind of elicit that sort of ecstatic, response to the idea of the sublime? Are there
Yes.
particular artists that you like to look at that you're going to find something really special there?
Well, I like a scenic overlook. That is like.
Yes. This is a good spot to be. Yeah, this is a good spot.
And it's like, wow, and in Vermont, there's some scenic overlooks, especially when you go to the Northeast Kingdom. They go on forever. Yeah. And you say, oh God, are those clouds far away over the Atlantic Ocean? Possibly. Yeah. And that's pretty cool. Sometime in the very early 90s, I took a trip across country and ended up on the rim of the Grand Canyon. It's like such a touristy thing to do, but I was completely blown away having never seen. The Northeast is closed. No matter how many skies you look at, it's still a closed area. There's always something blocking the light. But out there, it's open. The sky is enormous, and sometimes it's all blue, and that's like uncanny for me. Yeah. And that was a sublime experience, because standing there and looking across this too vast hole in the ground, full of detail, color striations, shapes, it was so new to my brain. And I'm sure everyone feels this when you first see something of that scale, that you end up being overwhelmed, and your brain can't take it all in at once. So you're looking at pieces, you got your camera, you're taking pictures, but the real experience is that first moment you look at it, and it's a surreal experience for your brain. And you haven't seen anything like that before, experienced that depth, and it's so deep and so far away that your brain is not getting that depth. It's like a camera that's looking for focus. And that kind of experience is neat. But also, there's some artists that, there's some current artists that kind of thrill me in that way. This last year, I saw Eric Aho's show, Wild Meadow, at DC Moore. And his paintings, they're kind of a large scale. Several of them were large scale. And they were large horizontals and bigger than you, so, and he works with a filter in a way, because he does a kind of stylized nature that removes itself from reality. And he uses sometimes bold color, sometimes sweet, lovely color, and calm color. And I had the feeling I could just walk into those things, and I wanted to keep looking at them. Those paintings were terrific. And as I mentioned, Stephen Hannock, he hits the mark as far as what the Romantic painters were doing. When you look at his work, you have a sense of awe. I remember a few decades ago going to the back of Graham Gallery and seeing an enormous waterfall painting of his. And I was just blown away by it because he also has a technique that is slightly unreal and is takes it somewhere else.
Mm. How do you make decisions about scale in your work?
Oh, well, some of it's...
What can fit in the studio?
Yeah, what can fit, economics, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's another aspect of being able to make a large thing. The stretchers are expensive and all of that. And so that limits it. You can do it once in a while. If there's an exhibit, and I like to think about the scale of different things in an exhibit, you know, pitting small things and large things together. Because you know, the smaller thing makes that larger thing even bigger, you know. So to the brain, you know. So and if you can remove that sense of scale, I think that's kind of interesting, an interesting thing to do.
And the last image that you showed in your slideshow was of one of your smaller pieces,
Yes.
which is just gorgeous, and uses one of these antique frames.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you make decisions about the frames and kind of what it adds to, what it brings to the work.
This is relatively a new thing. I had one framed painting in the Arcadia Rediscovered show, and I did it because I wanted to make that connection between the Hudson River School painters, sort of hinting at theatricality, and I wanted to bring that feel a little bit into that exhibit, and I thought that was really cool. And so I thought I would do it again with this Lineages exhibit and use a few of them and do an arrangement to sort of get a feel of an interior space, maybe just hint at an interior space. And that's something a little different. I'm making contemporary paintings, so I'm doing a romantic thing, but I'm trying to kind of suck some of the sweetness and sort of like any cloying qualities in these romantic paintings out. So that's why they are a little removed from reality, and the color is more about color field painting, perhaps, and the space is changed. The quality of the space, the depth, it's more parallel to the surface of the canvas than, let's say, other more realistic paintings. So this is a sort of a huge contrast to that.
Yeah. And I hope that we'll have a chance to go over and see the work in situ. And I also want to make sure that anybody else who might have some questions for Michael has a chance to ask them, just in case anyone wants to pipe up. Because I have some other questions, but they're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of how these things work. More specifically, I noticed that you have a lot of paintings that are almost square, but not exactly square.
Yes.
And why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Traditionally, you know, I do horizontals, but traditionally landscape paintings are horizontals, and there's some verticals, but the square upsets you more.
Yeah.
In that respect, you have to, and it's harder to make a composition in a square format, and I like that challenge, but I like the square format because it lends it once again to a more contemporary feel, or you know, the world of abstraction.
You were just talking about your experience at the Grand Canyon, and I'm kind of curious about when you're making your paintings, if you have to be kind of going in and out of focus as well. Like, what is your physical experience of making the paintings like? Given that you're up close to them, you know, I'm imagining that you have to be going back and forth a lot.
Yes, my studio is long and skinny.
Yeah.
And I do the paintings at the end, and so there's a lot of walking back and forth, and it's like I can walk 25 feet away, and then it's different, you know, and then you go and change it. Like when you're working at something up close, you think your brain says, oh, this is great, and then you step back and go, oh God, and it's like completely different, and you see it differently, you see it as a whole, um, so that that works. Doing that, going back and forth, and I think there's also the way I make a painting slows down the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not wet into wet, and it's not like all of a sudden in 3 days the painting is done.
Mm.
It takes a few months. And it takes a few months because they're oil glazes and they take time to dry from each one. Maxfield Parrish used this technique, and he got very luminous paintings out of it. And he would put his paintings in the sunlight to make the linseed all dry up. And then, I can't imagine the nits and bugs in them, right? And so he must have had to spend a lot of time, taking it off. Because, doing these glazes, they take a long time to dry, and you get little hairs and things. And you gotta, clean them off with a razor blade. It's got little
Oh my
TVs.
God.
So it takes a few days for that glaze to dry. So you end up working on a painting for about an hour to an hour and a half a day, and then you go to another painting. And then you keep rotating. You just keep rotating the paintings. And just do that.
That's interesting. I think I knew that, but I just actually thinking about how that must feel.
Yeah.
Are you ever concerned that they're all sort of blurring together?
Well, I run into the problem of I work, I have a hard time stopping and taking breaks or taking a day off. And but when I do take a day off, I go back in and go, my God, what did I do? Oh. And because you're too close, you need a break. You have to get your brain out of there, and then your brain all of a sudden sees it again. Even in the day when I'm working from the studio, I'll go to the kitchen and come back and then see the painting anew. And in New York, I used to try to look in a mirror. Someone mentioned that trick to me a long time ago, and because that tricks your brain into seeing something completely new. And so I used to do that sometimes. And when I first got here, I did that, but I don't do that so much anymore. I just sort of try to, and constantly rotating the paintings does that too. So for 2 days you don't see the painting, and then you see it again. So that helps also.
Wow.
So you get away from the redundancy.
That's amazing. Your brain must be constantly working. It sounds exhausting. It sounds wonderful, but it sounds really hard work.
Yeah.
There's a question over here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Michael, thank you very much for all your commentary and your work. You've talked a lot about art and nature.
Yeah.
You haven't mentioned science once.
Oh, I'm a big lover of science.
Well, that's
Chemistry
what I want you to
especially.
comment on. Nature is
Yeah.
one aspect of
Yeah.
science, but do you think about other aspects of science when you're doing these things?
I think about what the chemicals are doing to me. That's an issue, and always has been. I've always been a science nerd, and I've run into the problems of cocktail parties of saying too much, of obscure things at the wrong time, and people walk away. And so that's so I try not to do that anymore. But I think about science because I love the idea that so much of our world is chemistry and biology. And physics, and I loved physics in high school, and I love the relationship between things and the balance between things, and that triggers part of my mind of dealing with composition, balance, shape, and color.
If I could just say one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
When you showed the photograph in the church, particularly Jamaica,
Oh, yeah.
and I first discovered that when I was an undergraduate.
Yes.
In particular, I discovered his painting called Morning in the Tropics,
Ah.
which is in the Andes.
Yes.
Paint.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe it. So I went to Jamaica.
Yeah.
I went to the Andes.
Yeah.
And I really never found
That
a
vantage.
scene like that.
Yeah.
When you made the comment, you took everything out that was not
Yeah.
nature. Suddenly I realized that's why that train was.
Yes.
That's why that bridge wasn't
Yeah.
across that beautiful river.
Yeah.
Really astounding.
Oh, thank you. I also think they took poetic license and added things. I mean, this painting. I mean, he probably saw that tree somewhere, you know, and you know this. You know what I mean? That mountain. He probably put in things later, and this, you know. And plus, this painting is very close to the composition of Thomas Cole's The Oxbow.
Absolutely.
It's almost you could overlay them and they'd be quite similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a botanist, so
Yeah.
I can tell what is out of
Really?
place.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So when I see
Yeah.
these
All right,
guys-
I'm interested. What do you think?
Well, like Morning in the Tropics, the
Yeah,
palm trees he
yeah.
had there don't occur in where he was.
Oh, yeah.
So you're right, he
Oh,
puts these
wow.
things in there
Yeah.
for effect, but
Yeah.
not necessarily reality.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
Yeah, I think that's that sense of theater they have because, you know, this, you know, where is it? It's that Thomas Cole one. Oh, I think it's later. This one. This one's just nutty. I mean, this is like, oh, there's a wedding cake heaven in there, you know? It's like, what is that, you know? It's like, and so a lot of his paintings, he did the painting with this big urn that's, I don't know if you've all seen it, but it's a giant monumental urn. It's like, you know, Arcadian, and there's like trees in it, you know, and so he did this, you know, very more surreal.
I think there's a question over here. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, thank you.
Oh, sure.
I really enjoyed your show and your
thanks.
talk. Can you talk a little bit about your process? You did a little bit.
Yeah.
How you achieve that softness, because take a paintbrush
Yes.
and you get
Yeah.
strokes.
Yeah.
How do you achieve that
Yeah.
softness that you
I would love to make a brush mark and have the edges stay. But because of the way I make the paintings, the glaze is more liquidy sometimes, and I use a couple of different mediums. Galkid is one I use, and I've used for a long time, and I'm trying to get away from it a little bit because it does not hold the paint. It does not hold the structure when you do something. It starts to drip and sort of soften.
Yeah.
So when I do a painting, when I'm layering the glazes on, let's say I do, you know, just like pink and red glaze all over something, and then I add some green marks to it, well, those green marks will just start sinking down. If I don't take the painting and put it face up on a table for a few hours, for the mineral spirits to get out of it and for it to firm up. And lately I've been trying liquid, which is a lot firmer, and using a little more paint in the liquid. And that is leaving some brush marks, which is more interesting in a way, where I'm still doing this gauzy thing, but there's more shapes, you know, you can see more shapes. So I'm doing a little bit of that now.
A related question, Michael, on surfaces. Do you work on canvas or experiment with other surfaces?
Some of them are on wood panel, gessoed wood panel, and then some of them are on gessoed canvas. So either or. And then you know, on a stretcher. I also do very heavy 300-pound Arches watercolor paper and gesso that, because the glazes, as you layer them, tend to dry and pull, so the paper will curl and sort of do that, and so does the canvas. So when you finish a painting, you have to restretch it.
Oh my God, you do. Wow.
Yeah.